Thank you so much for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate. Today we bring you our special series, Finding Colorado's Next Governor. The Colorado Business Roundtable is proud to partner with the Denver Business Journal to bring you in-depth interviews with Colorado's gubernatorial candidates. I'm Tammy Schaefer, your on-air producer, along with Jeff Wasden, president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Hi, Jeff.
How are you? It's great to be back. First one of the year, 2018. We're off and running.
And Ed Seelever of the Denver Business Journal.
Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. And today our candidate is Cary Kennedy, a Democratic candidate for governor.
Tammy, thanks so much for having me here.
We're glad to have you.
Cary, it's great to have you. I'm going to jump right in. Do you find, before we get started on the real policy issues, that now that we've gotten through all of the Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, that people are actually ready to engage with the governor's race? Are they paying attention more?
They are, Jeff. I'm amazed as I travel this state, people that are turning out for events, they're engaged, they're interested in who Colorado's next governor is going to be, they're paying attention. This is an exciting election.
Love that. Well, let's just jump in and get a chance for our listeners to learn a little bit about Cary Kennedy, your background, and what led you to this decision to jump into this race to run for governor.
Yeah, so Jeff, I've been a part of Colorado's leadership team for a long time, more than a decade. I served as the state treasurer here in Colorado, and also served as the chief financial officer and the deputy mayor for the city of Denver. I think we're all really proud of our state. We are an innovative and forward-looking state. We've built one of the top economies in the country, and I'm running for governor to continue the great work that we are doing here, but also because there are some areas that I think we need to focus more on.
You know, we're going to shift our order of questions because the state treasurer runs right into a question that will come later on Para, but let's just jump into there. Obviously, you had a chance to serve the constituents here in the state of Colorado as the state treasurer, and Para was certainly not to the condition or state it's in now where people are worrying about questioning solvency and whether we need to change defined contributions, defined benefits, and some of those mechanics. The governor's put forth a plan. What does a Cary Kennedy plan for fixing Para look like, knowing your background as a former state treasurer?
Yeah, and let me just let you know, I've spent my career working to make sure that Colorado has good, strong financial policies. We have kept our state on good, strong financial footing, positioned Colorado to, as you know, lead the nation in the economic recovery. Para is an important part of that, and when I served on the board of Para as state treasurer, I helped lead the effort that resulted in the largest improvement to the health of Para in its history. Para, of course, is the Public Employees Retirement Fund here in Colorado, and I helped build bipartisan support to pass legislation that improved the financial health of Para by $9 billion. We have more work to do, but what we did then and how I will approach it as governor is we asked everybody to give a little bit. We asked our retirees to take a little bit of a cut in their benefits. We asked our employees to take a little bit to pay a little bit more into that fund. And we also asked the employers, the public employers across the state, to contribute a little bit more. When everybody gives a little, you can get broad-based gains and make sure that we protect the commitment to provide retirement security to over 500,000 people in our state who are members of Para and who don't receive Social Security. This is their Social Security.
Promises made, promises kept, and I love that fact, a little shared sacrifice, a little shared pain there.
And I had two things I want to follow up, first of all, and get you to explain to our listeners a little bit more. The $9 billion improvement, explain that. What time period is that over? How did you measure that?
So Para has an unfunded liability like a lot of pension funds around the country. The challenge for the pension funds has been volatility in the global investment markets. It's also because people are living a lot longer. You've got folks retired today when they started their careers as teachers or, working for the state. Life expectancy today is 10, 20 years longer than it was 50 years ago. And so those two pieces have contributed to an unfunded liability. In other words, if Para had to pay all the benefits today that it owes everybody for the next 50 years, it would be short. And so what we're doing is incrementally over time making the changes, again asking everybody to give a little so that as we continue to go forward, Para is always solvent and we're always able to uphold the commitments to provide the retirement support for our public employees.
But just to be clear, the $9 billion that you speak of, that's cutting down the unfunded liability during your time as treasurer?
Over the life of the fund, yes.
Okay. All right. And so obviously people are living longer, people are working differently. One of the ways they're working differently, they don't stay in the same job for 30 years anymore. There have been a couple of ideas kicked around about, okay, maybe for new entries into the system, we should look at a defined contribution plan rather than defined benefit. Good idea? Bad idea?
Yeah, there are a lot of ideas being talked about like that, and I'm open to looking at anything. I think it's important. The defined benefit pension system that we offer our public employees is a very important component to their compensation package. So people who work for the public sector, for the government, they take lower pay throughout their careers. They put more of it away so that they can have long-term financial security. When our police officers retire, or our firefighters retire, they need to know that that financial security is going to be there to help support their families. This is their way to save. So I think that defined benefit pension system is a very important component for the compensation we provide public employees.
Cary, I've got a letter going to the governor, lieutenant governor, the speaker, the Senate president, and the committee chairs on transportation. It's an issue that certainly the state is grappling with. The discussions around Amazon and growth and congestion, quality of life, efficiency of goods and services and moving that, and ability to attract and retain businesses. It's all kind of nestled in this conundrum that we've got some roads that were built for a certain number of wonderful residents of this great state that have exploded, with a lot more to come. Where are you at with transportation? What kind of solutions does Cary Kennedy want to put forth there to help us fix this issue and ensure that everybody enjoys the quality of life, can get up to the mountains during winter, and enjoy the efficient movement out to DIA if you're in the business world and need to continue to commute and move goods and services? What's your plan?
So addressing the impacts of growth is one of my top priorities as governor. I have watched the state's population here double in my lifetime growing up here, and the forecasters are telling us Colorado's population is going to double again. Another 4 to 5 million people are going to move here. We haven't adequately planned for the growth that we have today, and we need to do a much better job planning and preparing for the growth of the future. Our schools are crowded, and you're absolutely right, Jeff. We are all sitting in traffic, and our roads and infrastructure are in disrepair. About half the lane miles in this state are rated in poor condition. And people know it. They see the deterioration of our transportation networks. So we need to make serious investments in transportation to catch up with the demands we have now. And I support an all of the above strategy. I don't believe we can, add enough lanes to get all of us out of traffic, but certainly the improvements of our highway and road will be a priority. But we also have to add other components like transit and like ride shares and like van pools and bike lanes and opportunities for people to move as well as cars to move.
And how would you support then we go about paying for that? I mean, there's a couple things that are getting kicked around, and maybe this would be settled by the time you're taking office as governor if you were to win this race. Maybe it won't be. Do you feel like this is something where we should be looking for more money within the existing revenues the state is bringing in? Do you feel like this has got to be something that comes from a tax hike or other revenue increase?
We're going to need additional revenue in transportation if we're going to keep people moving in this state. Our primary source of revenue to fund transportation in Colorado for a very long time, in nearly 100 years, has been the fuel tax. It's been eroding for the last 3 decades. We have about half the purchasing power today or less than we did 30 years ago on that fuel tax. And that creates a challenge. It's been a challenge for the last 4 governors. It's going to be a challenge for the next 4 governors. And we're going to have to work together and roll up our sleeves. I'm pleased to see business leaders working with state leaders, as they did last year, to pass a $1.5 billion package to invest more in transportation infrastructure. And we're just going to have to keep marching forward, and as our economy grows, invest dollars back into the infrastructure of the state. I will add that we have an amendment in our Constitution, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, that has prevented us from keeping up with the demands of a growing economy. It has prevented the state from keeping the tax revenue generated off of growth, so we haven't been able to put that money back in to investing in the infrastructure that supports that growth. I have called for permanent TABOR reform my entire career, and as governor, I will lead the bipartisan coalition to pass permanent TABOR reform here, statewide, as almost every local government in the state has already.
And for those who may just hear that term but not understand what you mean, permanent TABOR reform in your mind equates to?
We need to let the state keep the revenue that's generated off of real growth in our economy that right now our Constitution doesn't let us keep. So think of the tremendous growth we've had in Colorado's economy. That's the money, that's the revenue you use to invest back into the foundation that supports your economy. Invest back into your infrastructure, invest back into your education system. That's what's been hurting us for the last 25 years. It's why we have fallen behind in investing in our schools, investing in our roads. And you will see me as governor lead to fix that.
And so, just to be clear, then you're talking about kind of removal of the revenue cap, but not removal of the provision that allows for taxpayers to vote on whether or not to raise their taxes, or do you want to see that too?
Yeah, it's the cap that has prevented us from keeping the tax revenue generated off of growth in this economy that has prevented us from keeping up with growth in the economy. And we have bipartisan support to fix that today. And I will, as I helped lead the last balanced budget agreement, referendum C, that passed here in Colorado as governor, I will lead to pass permanent TABOR reform and build the bipartisan support to pass it.
Cary, I want to keep along that theme of dealing with this doubling of our population as projected. You mentioned a growth strategy, transportation being a component. The pressures have certainly expanded beyond our roads and the congestion into certainly housing issues, housing shortage, attainable, affordable worker housing. Talk a little bit about the other tenets of a growth strategy that you're putting forth as governor and what that looks like.
Yeah, so let me just say, we all feel this pinch. I remember when my kids were young and I was working full time and trying to get home at the end of the day to cook dinner and getting stuck in traffic. We're all facing challenges with how do we find housing that is adequate for, as we have more children and we need more space. It's almost impossible to find affordable housing here for folks who are living on an income. The population pressure is making Colorado less and less affordable to live here. And so my agenda around growth is affordability. It's making sure we make those investments in transportation and transit so we're not stuck in traffic and we get that time with our families. Starting the first affordable housing fund here in Colorado. We're one of the few states that doesn't have one. And the state needs to support our local communities in paying for affordable housing. It's also, Jeff, an agenda around protecting this beautiful state. And as our population grows, we need to make sure that we protect our open space and our public lands, that we protect our air quality and our water quality. We transition to more sustainable uses of energy. There are a lot of components to dealing with this growth, and quite frankly, I think it's the most pressing issue facing the future governor.
Hey, piggybacking on that, when you start looking at incentives and economic development, Amazon has certainly been in the news, and certainly the governor was kind of caught up into a purported joke around not shedding any tears and breathing a sigh of relief. One of the other candidates has talked about campaigning actively against that because of the use of the incentives, the growth, the infrastructure. We haven't made those investments. How do you deal with economic development, economic gardening in either attracting business or supporting the businesses here in the state of Colorado, in particular maybe rural Colorado?
Yeah, so I've helped lead some of the largest economic development projects here in the state. When I was the CFO for the city of Denver, I helped Mayor Hancock work with Adams County to open up the land around Denver International Airport for commercial development, which is one of the largest economic development opportunities we have today in the region. I have an approach that I would take with Amazon that I would take with other companies. And I think the fact that Amazon has put Denver on its top 10 or top 20 list just shows how attractive our region is. And I think they are looking at our region not because we're offering them a big tax subsidy. I don't think we should offer Amazon, a great big sweetheart deal. We should treat them as we treat other businesses that are looking at moving high-paying jobs into the region. We certainly want our kids to be able to grow up in a community where there are good jobs that pay good salaries. But I would ask of Amazon what I would ask of other businesses, which is, do you want to be part of our community's success? Will you help us accomplish what we need to accomplish in this region to keep Colorado the place that we love? Will you help us pay for affordable housing? Will you help us invest in transit? Will you help us reduce our take out of our rivers and water? Will you help us by transitioning to clean, renewable energy sources?
There are people out there who are suggesting not only that they're not excited about Amazon, but that Colorado's growth is getting a bit out of control. We've seen a potential ballot initiative this year that would limit growth in the Front Range to 1% new housing permits per Front Range county. What do you think about those ideas? I mean, are they worth considering, or is the idea of stopping growth just a futile one that shouldn't be considered?
I don't think you can stop growth. I think that those are national and international demographic patterns. People are moving here for a lot of reasons. And, my family was welcomed here. My husband's family was welcomed here. It's an important value in our state. But we need to manage that growth much better so that we can protect the state that we love and we can grow in ways that are more sustainable and really keep Colorado the place that we want to live.
And I kind of mentioned that a few times, and I agree with you completely, Cary. I think it's leadership that needs to continue to drive the policy decisions and the discussions around infrastructure and education and attainable housing that will drive that and support the growth that this state will continue to see. You mentioned renewable, and so it's a great segue for us to get into energy and energy policies here in the state. A couple of your primary opponents have put forth a 100% renewable plan. What does an energy policy under a Governor Kennedy look like?
Well, Colorado has a huge opportunity to be a national leader as we are today in the transition to clean, renewable sources of energy. We have some of the best wind and sun resources in the country, and we already are developing that. We've made over $5 billion of investment in eastern Colorado, creating thousands of jobs in communities that have been distressed. So it is a new opportunity not just to move to clean, renewable sources of energy, which is such an important goal because we need to meet the emissions reductions targets that are laid out in the Paris Agreement so that we're doing our part to address climate change, but it's also a huge opportunity for economic development in rural communities around our state to develop wind and solar resources here.
And so, obviously, and I think a lot of people talk in those same terms, are there policies you'd put into place to speed along that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, we all have long-term goals of trying to get to 100% clean renewable sources. But for me, what matters is what we do in the next 4 or 5 years. We need to take steps now to continue to increase our investment and development of clean renewable sources of energy. So Colorado, first state in the country where voters approved a statewide renewable energy standard. We have raised that standard, and now it's 30% clean renewable source. We're going to meet that ahead of schedule. That's how successful this state is. So you'll see me as governor call to raise that standard again. Let's keep going. Let's keep making this progress and move as aggressively and as quickly as possible.
To a particular percentage?
I think eventually we all want to get to 100%. For me, what happens over the next 4 or 5 years, getting to 50%, if we can do it, is more important than setting out a goal 20 or 30 years from now.
A lot of discussion around energy and energy policy at the local level, local communities trying to step into this space and try and regulate, take the role of the COGCC. Discussions around certainly setbacks have made a lot of news recently. How do you feel about those issues? Should local governments be involved in energy policy here at the state? And where are you at with the setback discussion, whether it's 2,000 or 2,500?
Yeah, so Colorado has extensive oil and gas development here. We have for a very long time. We're one of the top oil and gas producing states in the country. It is important. It's an important industry to Colorado's economy. It's an important industry to the energy security of the country. But we need to make sure that as the energy industry develops those resources, that it's done in ways that protect public health, safety, welfare, and our environment. And that is a shared responsibility between the state regulatory body, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, which needs to make sure it is playing its part to protect public health, safety, and welfare. But also, yes, I support giving local jurisdictions who are heavily impacted by oil and gas development in their own communities more of a voice, more of a role in regulating and siting wells in their communities.
How do you approach the operators at that point if they're trying to figure out and navigate the landscape of a patchwork policy organization, different between Weld to Longmont to Broomfield to Arapahoe? What does that discussion entail, and how would you lead that to I think, a satisfactory outcome for all involved?
You know, I think there are really good companies in this state that are doing that work. They are working very closely with local regulators, with state regulators to make sure that their operations aren't creating any substantial risks for health, safety, or welfare in those communities. There is a collaborative process, and they respect the role that regulators are playing in saying, you know, look, it's not appropriate to site a well here. It's too close to a school, or it's too close to a neighborhood. Those are the kind of businesses we want. Where we're getting into trouble is you've got some operators out there that really are pushing that envelope. And we need to make sure that state and local regulators have the authority and the teeth to say public health, safety, and welfare has to come first.
And I'm curious, in addition to the idea of ramping up public health and safety oversight, this could, and certainly some of the plans that are in place right now, displace existing energy businesses, particularly in coal country. We're seeing that. Do we just let them hang on their own, or do you have to go in as governor and say, okay, if we're going to say we're moving from one energy source to another, here's how we're going to help you who have relied on this energy source?
We are seeing a reduction in coal, and it's not just impacting the families that have worked in those mines for generations, but it has broader impacts. We used to have about 40 coal trains rolling down the Front Range to the plant in Pueblo a day, and now we're down to 20. And when the Comanche plant starts to shutter its operations, we're probably going to cut it in half again. So it's a broad economic impact along the entire distribution chain. And it's important that we offer folks who have been a part of the coal industry the opportunity for retraining. If they want to try to move into a different energy sector or into a different career entirely, there are opportunities in decommissioning those plants and those mines where the former mine workers can continue to stay on site in their communities and do that work. That can take up to 10 years. But we need to support those families and make sure that they have financial resources in their communities as those plants close.
You're listening to Connect and Collaborate, and today we are focusing on our series, Finding Colorado's Next Governor. Today our candidate is Cary Kennedy, and we'll be back with more in this conversation. Stay with us. Today here on Connect and Collaborate as we bring you our Finding Colorado's Next Governor series. Today we are talking with Cary Kennedy, a Democratic candidate for governor for the state of Colorado.
Great. And Treasurer Kennedy, I think we started off, we breezed over your background a bit, noting you were elected statewide and deputy mayor at Denver. But let's go back a little bit. Tell us what you did before you were the treasurer. You've had a varied career and some very important policies before that.
Well, thank you, Ed. Yes, I grew up here in Colorado and actually started my career working for Governor Roy Romer. Worked closely with the last 4 governors and have had the great privilege of working in communities across our state for decades. Early in my career, I worked for the Child Health Plan, helped expand health insurance to tens of thousands of low-income kids here in our state. I was the author of the only measure that's passed statewide in Colorado in 30 years that increased funding for our public schools. And public education is my top priority as governor. I believe Colorado can and should be doing a much better job to serve the educational needs of all the kids across our state today, and we can talk about that. I served as the treasurer throughout the economic crisis, so I helped balance the state's budget through the economic crisis, manage the state's investments, and thankfully was able to move some of our state investments out of some risky Wall Street positions and avoid the losses that other states incurred. It is a great privilege to be a candidate for governor. It's a wonderful state, and I am running to continue the great work we're doing here, but also to put more of an emphasis and focus on improving our public schools.
So how do you do that then? I mean, that's obviously a broad segue in here, improving schools. I think everybody would be for improving education. What specific steps would you as governor take to improve how we educate our children?
We have the number 1 economy in the country right now, and we rank at the bottom in the investment that we're making in our schools. Half of the school districts in the state of Colorado today have cut back to a 4-day school week. We are paying our teachers among the lowest salaries in the country. So it's no surprise when you wake up in the morning and you read about a teacher shortage crisis. We're losing our good teachers. They are leaving the profession. They are leaving the state. They can't afford to live here. They can't afford to work here. You will see me as governor work to build an adequately and equitably funded education system across our state. You asked about my background a little. I actually grew up with 3 brothers and sisters who joined my family through the foster care program. And I have a sister who joined my family through her church. So I grew up with brothers and sisters who didn't have the same opportunities that I had been given. And I saw firsthand how important it is that we give opportunities to kids through our public schools. And sadly, we've been falling farther behind for almost 3 decades here. And it is my top priority as governor to build an education system in this state that we can all be proud of. We should have one of the best public education systems in the country.
Well, I want to pick up from there. Let's assume that you're successful in ensuring an adequate and equitable investment in funding, whether that's ensuring that we get to a 5-day week, whether that's full-day kindergarten, whether that's teacher salaries, all of those things are equal. How do you deal with accountability and choice and ensuring that all students are equipped with the right skills as they enter the workforce? That's obviously a top priority of the Business Roundtable and the business community, is the talent that we're receiving and the amount of remedial work that we need to do to upskill and onboard and train those to get them ready to enter the workforce and be productive day one.
Yeah, and I think for the business community, they know, anybody who's run an organization knows there is nothing more important to the success of that organization than the pipeline of talent you are bringing into it. And we are losing that competition. We need to be supporting our teachers. And I'll tell you, I think teachers, all they want is for their students to be successful. And we are not giving them the support and the tools and the resources that they need to ensure that all of their children and all of their students are successful. My goal as governor is to make sure that every public school, neighborhood schools and the other choices that kids have through the public education system and opportunities that we're providing, all of those schools need to be great choices, right? Choice is a fallacy if your neighborhood school isn't a good choice. So that's where you're going to see me focus my work and attention, and I'm looking forward to working with the business community to make this Colorado's priority.
Now, this is a bit like the transportation conversation, but you're talking about more resources. Where are those coming from? Is this another stream of revenue we're going to have to seek? Are there places in the budget where we can take money away from certain areas to put them into education?
So I always joke that the first rule of holes is if you're in one, stop digging. And it is why you heard me early in this interview say, I will lead to pass permanent Tabor reform in the state. So as our economy grows, we can capture the great benefits of that growth and invest it back into our education system. That is what we have not been able to do for the last 25 years, and it's why we rank at the bottom.
Okay. And I know Jet's going to go there, so I'm just going to step in here. But,
go ahead.
When we have those resources, when we're funding classrooms to the more adequate level that you see, how do we ensure that we're developing students with skills for a 21st century economy here? What kind of things do we need to do to make sure we stay competitive and we're churning out that pipeline? Is that already in place? Does it just need more money, or do we need a different focus in how we produce these graduates?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ed, and one of the most exciting things I see happening today are the partnerships that are developing between businesses, industry, and our schools. We have a huge opportunity to have our students starting in high school offered the opportunity to learn employable skills right alongside their pre-college curriculum. Students starting in high school should be able to take coding and medical records and emergency medical courses, a full array, even the trades, plumbing, electrician, the apprenticeships that are being established, and they're being done in limited numbers in a limited number of places, is exactly the direction we need to go. We need all of our kids to have those opportunities. I visited a school in Bailey, and they've got 50 kids that are able to go into vocational and technical programs, and they got another 50 or 100 kids sitting on a waiting list. That shouldn't happen for kids who want to get those skills when they're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. We need to be providing those opportunities. I helped develop the early dual enrollment legislation here that allows kids to work towards their certificates, their associate's degree while they're still in high school, and we need to expand that program and make it available to everyone.
Ed's pinged you a couple times on that revenue question and where those funds come from. There would be some that would argue the state does not have a revenue problem. We've got a spending problem, this 40% growth in our state budget over time. What are the ways that you could prioritize the necessary and critical functions of government and ensure that the role of government is duly funded at the adequate and appropriate levels?
Yeah, well, the first thing we have to do is make sure that we're using the resources that we have in ways that truly benefit our state, that we're making investments and the money that we're spending is actually making a difference. One of the initiatives I started when I was the CFO in Denver is a first of its kind program in the country that is moving homeless individuals out of the correction system into supportive housing. Well, it turns out we were spending so much money on these folks because they're spending 100 nights a year in the Denver jail. That becomes their default housing. They're visiting the emergency room. They're visiting detox. They're the most expensive folks we're serving. And we were able to cut their costs in half, what the taxpayers were spending on these individuals, and move them out of the jail and into supportive housing and free up those jail beds. So you will see me as governor work to make sure that we are always looking at how we use our existing resources and is it accomplishing the objectives that we want, and only then do we look to expanding revenues. But for our schools, for those schools that are out there on a 4-day school week, or to build a talent pipeline into teaching, we're going to have to look at new revenue streams.
And it's a great example you cite there. I think everybody would say that is a good program you developed there. But if you hear any complaints coming from the business community in Denver, it's that Denver has spent so much time focusing on individuals like this and yet hasn't done anything to make it easier for people to run businesses, to start businesses, to even get the permits to go into where they want to go. Regulatory reform is an issue that has come back over and over at the State House here. Do you feel the state state is in a good enough position to let people start and grow businesses, or do you feel like more has to be cut in terms of regulations to allow that to happen?
So we have to make sure that our businesses here can succeed and can thrive and be successful, can expand, can grow, and that we are competitive as a state for businesses. 97% are small businesses, and we have to make sure that we have a business environment that supports their operation. Again, when I was CFO of Denver, I worked very closely with the software industry when they came to the city and said, gosh, we're hung up on this regulatory tax problem that's creating a disadvantage for us to be doing business in Denver. Well, if you look at that record, I got to work and we got that fixed in a matter of weeks, because we don't want our software industry to feel like they've got to leave in order to be competitive. So you're absolutely right, and we have to make sure that we have a business environment that supports the success of our businesses here, and I have a long record of doing that. I also helped develop a tax program that created an incentive for businesses here to expand, not just businesses to come in from out of state, right? Not just recruitment. We want the businesses who are here to be able to expand and succeed, and our tax structure needs to reflect that.
So in terms of that business atmosphere, do you feel like we're where we need to be, or are there specific things you would change as governor to improve it?
Overall, Colorado's business climate is highly competitive, and on a case-by-case basis where there are issues that come up, like our business personal property tax, like the Gallagher Amendment, you're going to see me as governor sit down and work with businesses to make sure that we have a business climate here where our companies can succeed.
We had just had some interesting developments in healthcare. Jamie Dimon, who's actually the chair of the Business Roundtable from J.P. Morgan, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, put out a new healthcare proposal that takes out the profit area that they feel was driving costs up. Healthcare is a tough issue. We've had Medicaid expansion in this state. Everybody in this state is desirous of a well-functioning, efficient, transparent healthcare system. What do you do, Cary, about healthcare in Colorado from top to bottom, from those employed workforce with the Affordable Care Act, moving the mandates, the HIT tax, Cadillac tax, it goes on and on. It's a tough issue. What are your thoughts on healthcare?
Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize our success of covering more people. We have 94% of the people in the state today have health insurance. That is a great achievement, given that a couple decades ago, we had a pretty high percent of our population who were uninsured. The challenge we face is costs. And for folks who are in the individual market in particular, I hear too often around this state families that are paying $2,000 a month or even $3,000 a month for their family's health insurance when you add up those premiums and those out-of-pocket costs and the pharmaceuticals. So what we need to do is have state policies that help control those costs, which is why I have proposed, and I'm the only candidate running for governor who has, that we offer a public health insurance buy-in option for everyone in this state. It wouldn't be any new. It's not tax supported. Individuals would buy it. They would pay premiums in the same way they buy health insurance today in the private market, but we would give them a public option on the exchange that they could purchase. They could purchase either the state's Medicaid plan as their health insurance, or they could purchase either of the plans that we offer our state employees. And Jeff, to your point, the reason those are less expensive and we should pass those savings on to anyone in our state is because we have a very large pool of people. We can negotiate more affordable rates, and there isn't a profit margin in those public plans. So we should pass those savings on to folks statewide and put that competitive pressure in the market on the private providers to keep their costs under control.
Certainly, the idea of affordability and access have become more and more two different dimensions in the healthcare debate. And there are a lot of doctors who will not take Medicaid. There are an increasing number of doctors over the past 5 years who don't take Medicare because they see government reimbursements being lower than the private sector. So if we put more people on what's essentially a publicly supported plan, how do we guarantee they'll actually get in to see doctors even though they have insurance?
Well, Medicaid actually has the largest provider pool in the state, and we're working aggressively to continue to grow it. And as you add more people into that plan, doctors are going to need to take it. And I know that's a tough call because there isn't the profit margin that's there. But I believe deeply that healthcare has to be accessible and affordable for everyone in our state. Every family has a story to tell. And, for me, when our son was young, he had a serious asthma condition. And so, I was one of those moms up at the bedside through the middle of the night, worried that my son couldn't get a breath and driving to the emergency room at 2 a.m. And I can't imagine what it is like for parents who have a sick child and can't get the health care they need. The state needs to lead on this issue. We can't wait for Washington, and we need to take the steps necessary to ensure that health care, affordable health care, is accessible to everyone.
I want to shift over into an area we've chatted a little bit around as far as economic development. We've got really two economies here in Colorado. We certainly have a Front Range Metro Denver economy, but as you move out into the plains and the West Slope, they're experiencing a different sort of economic realities there. If you have any specific economic development policies specific to rural Colorado, certainly please share those. But there are other issues like broadband access that they're struggling with. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you ensure that all four corners of Colorado are taken care of.
Yeah, I hear a lot on this campaign, Jeff, that there are two Colorados. There's the metro area, and there's everywhere else. And we're not seeing the economic strength throughout the state that we're experiencing here on the Front Range. And there are several things that we need to do. First and foremost is supporting those communities and investing in their infrastructure. You mentioned transportation, you mentioned broadband. We absolutely have to make sure we have broadband into these rural counties. I hear from shop owners on Main Street who during a holiday weekend, they lose their internet and they can't swipe credit cards. And they're losing a huge percentage of their business if they lose shoppers on a big summer holiday weekend. When I was the state treasurer, I created the largest rural infrastructure investment program. It's called Building Excellent Schools Today. So what I heard from a lot of rural communities is families out there were worried that their kids couldn't get the same great quality education in those small towns. And you go out into rural Colorado and kids are going to school in buildings that are 100 years old. They have lead pipes, they have asbestos, they have mold, they flood. I have toured schools where sewage backs up into the classroom, which is why when I was state treasurer, I created a program that has rebuilt 380 schools in the poorest communities around our state. And that's the kind of leadership I'll provide as governor. It's working in those communities, it's listening to what their community needs and making sure the state is able to provide that support.
So we've gone over a lot of topics today, and I want you to try to I want you to try to draw a line for people around your candidacy. What have we heard out of you today that people aren't hearing on business issues out of other Democratic candidates? What do you think really separates you from your other Democratic candidates in terms of what you do for the business world?
Well, I think the agenda that I have for Colorado is an agenda that is good for the people who live here. It's also an agenda that helps support business in our state and attract business and jobs to our state. There are really three components to it. The first one is education. And, I think the business community is looking for leadership on this. They want kids that are growing up here in Colorado to have this foundational skill and training to be able to fill the jobs of the future. I see too often businesses recruiting their talent from out of state. We want them recruiting from here in state. And quite frankly, when businesses look at the attraction of an area, they look at how good are your schools. So priority number one, education. Number two, healthcare, keeping it accessible and affordable for everyone in our state. That's critically important to the business community. They can't shoulder this alone. We have to have the participation of the public sector, of the state and the federal government to help control healthcare costs in this country. And then finally, addressing the impacts of growth. How many businesses are trying to get their products from one side of the state to the other, and their drivers are sitting in traffic and they're facing delays and costs. We need to make sure we make the investments, or it's the shop on Main Street in a rural town where they don't have broadband. We have to make the investments to modernize our infrastructure so that we can keep Colorado the place that we all love, and that also supports the business environment.
Cary, you mentioned you've worked very closely with the last four governors, but you're following Governor Hickenlooper. I want you to talk a little bit about his legacy and what grade you'd give Governor Hickenlooper, what you do differently, what great accomplishments you'd like to continue, and where you pivot in a new direction if elected.
Well, I think Governor Hickenlooper has created a lot of the tremendous economic success that we have in this state. I give him tremendous credit. We are an innovative and forward-looking state. We are ranked right now the top economy in the country, and his work that he did as mayor of Denver in investing in the innovation and the creative talent and the energy that we're attracting the companies and the startups here in the Front Range. It's made Denver and it's made the Front Range one of the most appealing places in the country. His work on the outdoor retailers show, his work on expanding the beer industry here in our state. He's really been
shocking, that one. I don't know where that came from.
It's exciting for all of us to see the creative talent that is here in our state, and I give him great credit for that. Where you'll see, you'll see me continue that work to support the business community here. But where you'll see me place some new focus is on building an education system that matches that great progress. I want an education system in our state that matches the great success that we're seeing in other areas of our economy, because we want our kids who are growing up here to be able to benefit from that success, to be able to stay here and to be competitive for those jobs, and to be able to invest back into our state in the same way that we're enjoying today.
For all the $800 million negative factor we've built up in K-12 education that we talk about so much, we don't tend to talk about higher education. In fact, I don't know that we really talked about higher education beyond K-12 today. What do we need to do in your mind to get that back up to where it needs to be?
Yeah, and I often think of education as a P20 system. I love the work that we're doing in sort of blending that high school and college curriculum through programs like early college degrees, dual enrollment degrees, kids being able to start to work towards advanced degrees while they're still in high school to shorten that time and hopefully save some money as well for our students. We have made college too expensive in this state. We've cut the state's investment in higher education in half in the last 15 years, and all of that has fallen onto the students. I'm looking at this now as a parent. I went online. My daughter's applied to the University of Colorado, and I went online. It is $120,000. $120,000 for a 4-year degree at our in-state tuition at our flagship university. Most families can't pay for that. So we have to do better as a state at supporting our public colleges and universities to keep higher education affordable for the kids who are growing up here.
We've got an incredible State of Higher Ed event coming up with the Business Roundtable with all 4 flagship universities here in the state. So we're going to draw into those same kind of issues about affordability. Cary, last couple seconds, tell people how to find you.
Thank you. My website's CaryKennedyForGovernor.com. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Tammy.
Cary, great conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for Cary for being with us, and thanks for listening to Finding Colorado's Next Governor here on Connect and Collaborate. We're the voice of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.